各位，在孟买举行海洋工业的重量级讨论的时候，专家们都说有一个现实迫在眉睫：如果你不承认中国在全球造船及海权格局中的主导地位，那你就无法制定真正有效的战略。海上航线、船厂密集、市场份额、造船周期，还有律师技术，这一切都不再是简单的经济问题，而是国家安全、国际秩序与产业规则的交汇点。你可能会听到很多媒体说，造船是传统的产业，已经被服务业所替代。但现实是，最新数据告诉我们，2024年中国的造船新订单量占据全球大约 70%。在2025年前3个季度，中国在完工量、新订单、订单积压3大指标上依旧位居世界首位。换一句话说，中国不仅在赶上，而是已经在设置规则。那么他们如何走到这一步的呢？第一，是中国对造船业的战略性投入，国家动机、产业政策、庞大的国内需求以及出口的市场，共同构成了这一座工业的巨舰。其次是市场份额逻辑的极端应用，谁抢占订单，谁就拥有经验优势，成本下降、规模优势、产业链完善。第三是海权与造船的深度交织，造船不仅意味着建船，还意味着控制航线、港口和物流的通道。凡此种种，使得这不仅仅是一个产业的竞争，更是全球力量结构的重塑。在这种格局下，其他国家若只想着自己和别人抢订单，而忽略了中国背后的扩大规模、经营曲线下降、产业深耕3个支柱，那就等于在失去竞赛。中国在抓市场、抓技术、抓布局，比如在绿色船舶、双燃料船、海洋工程船这些高附加值细分领域已经取得显著的领先。而对于他们而言，关键的不只是如何竞争，更是如何构建自己的参与方式。这一次讨论分为3个模块：当前的市场状态、造船产业从过去的低端制造迈向高端装备、绿色转能、规模化应用，这些到底未来的路径是合作还是对抗呢？谁将在新时代的海权和造船中赢得自主权呢？欧洲、印度、韩国要如何定位？他们又应该做出如何的选择？在这一系列过程中，一个核心问题需要反复自问：如果中国已经拥有全球造船的主导权，那么在市场份额上争斗还有意义吗？如果造船成为了海权的一环，谁就控制了造船，那谁控制了造船，谁就可能在海洋物流、能源通道、军事支持中获得话语权。我们是否准备好用战略的思维，而不仅仅是用经济的思维来面对这一变化呢？如果是下一个10年，你会发现自己并不是在与中国竞争，而是成为中国供应链的一环。那你是否愿意主动当赋能者，还是被动做承接者呢？这就是他们今天必须面对的现实。让我们看一下视频。
Second is China. Okay, so description of the event. This panel talks about the importance of China and how dominant it is. Right? You can't actually come up with a strategy if you don't think that China gets a vote, because China will act strategically in response to anything any other country does, or any series of countries can do. And one thing I point out to my colleagues and to Americans, if the rest of the world just competes against each other for market share, that just means China wins. Okay? And the market will become more imbalanced than it already is. And finally, maybe this is the American perspective, you have to take into consideration naval power. Okay? Most developing countries, most major countries look at commercial and naval shipbuilding as complements. I'm not sure that's true economically, but we really do have to talk about what is the role of military power, what is the role of the sea lines of communication. If we don't take that seriously, then we don't have a serious maritime industrial strategy. Okay, I'm done talking. I want to start the questions off by really talking about kind of describing the market as it is and how we got here. And to do that, I'm going to start with a representative of South Korea, which is a very well-established shipbuilder, Dr. Choi, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Chaogil Arjun, who can give the Indian perspective on where we got here. So Dr. Troy, I'll turn to you.
Thank you for this opportunity. So I'm going to very broadly touch upon the most three things. Firstly, what are the foundations for South Korea's maritime supremacy? And lastly, I will touch upon what are the current status of South Korea's cooperation. And finally, what would be the pathways for future cooperation with the countries. And firstly, I think the foundations for South Korea's maritime supremacy based on broadly three things. First aspect is social condition and historical condition. Since South Korea is a kind of a peninsula nation, we were invited frequently and repeatedly via sea. And so first, such as 16th century, we had Imjin War and Admiral Lee Sun-shin defended South Korea from a Japanese invasion with only 12 total ships. And so sea, which has a kind of significant meaning for South Koreans, because sea is vital for South Korea. It's to secure our sovereignty and as well as to secure our economic prosperity. So these kind of broad-based social conception was kind of backbone of South Korea's strong pursuit in South Korea's maritime supremacy. And secondly, South Korea pursued a very aggressive industrial policy. So throughout 1970s and 1980s, South Korea pursued very heavy and chemical industrialization policy and very strong export-oriented policy, and all of this policy was kind of in those background were the shipbuilding industry, and so industrial perspective. I want to emphasize South Korea is not only quantitative power, but it's also qualitative power. So if you look at the current figure, South Korea is leading the green shipbuilding industry. More than 60% of global share is accounted by South Korea's three big shipbuilding companies like Hyundai, Samsung, and Hanwha Ocean. So which means that we emphasize a very sophisticated, technologically advanced, and eco-friendly technology in shipbuilding industry. And third one, which was comparatively lack, was a kind of a perception on the geopolitical and geostrategic meaning of shipbuilding industry. But the whole situation, the whole landscape has been changed since the assertive rise of China, because it's aggressively pursuing dual-use technology in shipbuilding. Because mostly over 70% of Chinese shipbuilding, the income comes from the military domain. So it makes South Korean government and shipbuilders recognize that it is a very strategic industry and it's a kind of backbone of our national security concern. So all these combined, South Korea now has a renewed cooperative relationship. So one example would be South Korea-US shipbuilding cooperation. I think Professor Hong Jong Kim will give you more detailed explanation, but MASCA project, which South Korea will contribute immensely to revive US's shipbuilding industry. It's not about only industrial concern. It's more like a strategic alignment to secure the sovereignty and economic prosperity. So this is very important. And another additional cooperation that now recently we are seeing is our partnership with Australia and with India too. The last July 1st MOU between Kuchun Shipyard Ltd and HD Hyundai Heavy Industry is, I think, is really an important step forward, because it aims to have military and industrial cooperation and also the naval MRO in India. So what would be the pathways forward to have more cooperative more cooperative scene in shipbuilding industry, I think three are important. Firstly, as I've mentioned, industry and economic concern is now, I think, is almost secondary because we need security-based perception, which means that trust and strategic alignment should be common first and foremost priority in pursuing shipbuilding cooperation. So that's why the platforms like Sagar Mantan that we have today is very important. And I want to see more Korean officials and scholars presenting here in this really important platform further. And secondly, I think institutional platform needs to be further developed. So for instance, G7 Plus platforms can now invite South Korea, Australia, India. And we have a trilateral platform talking about critical technology amongst South Korea, US, and India. And we can have a similar form of cooperation in shipbuilding industry too. And also we have to remember the ASEAN-led platforms such as ADMM Plus and ASEAN ARF, which is already functioning quite well. And last but not least, we have a bilateral partnership agreement between South Korea and Vietnam and South Korea and Philippines in securing maritime security. So we can further these kind of platforms with India and other countries, which has strategically aligned perception on this shipbuilding industrial cooperation. And finally, last but not least, I want to add one more dimension on this shipbuilding cooperation, which is human cooperation, because Japan and South Korea and even China, we are suffering from the lack of a young generation. So we can think of, based on IMO's STCW convention, we can think of inviting young Indian shipbuilding aspiring generations to practice in South Korea and pursue their career in South Korea, but as well in the international domain. And I think it can be discussed in ongoing South Korea-India CEPA upgrade negotiations, and which can be really beneficial for both countries. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Arjun, what does the current market look like from your perspective?
So I think to take forward what Professor Choi has just said about the journey, and I think we've seen over the last couple of weeks, months, and also during this week, such a large program on the maritime industry. So there is a big impetus that the government is giving to shipbuilding, and the reason is that this is really part of India's journey towards rebalancing economy from a very services-led economy today towards a more manufacturing economy, industrial economy. And the reason is they believe, and empirically quite rightly, if you see the evidence, that it's only true way towards sustainable development. And shipbuilding plays an extremely important role in that because it's a very large employment generator within shipyards itself, but also a very large multiplier. So for every job within a shipyard, there's approximately 7 jobs created outside a shipyard. So the multiplier effect is quite large. From an investment perspective, you spoke about the necessity to have scale and specialization in this industry. So that also then definitely necessitates a lot more investments within the shipyard and also outside, because you have extremely wide and diverse ancillary ecosystem as well that gets developed with this. So the investment multiplier is 3 times over there. So it's really for these reasons that you really see India really putting so much focus over here, and which is why they've announced a package from the government side of around $10 billion towards this sector over the next decade or so.
I'm going to invite the other 3 panelists to briefly sort of respond to kind of what our first 2 speakers have said about the state of the market. And in particular, I'd like maybe to talk a bit more about labor, which seems to be a fundamental constraint on all 3 of your respective political entities. So I think I'll go from left to right. We'll start with August, please.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. So really, Jonathan, I feel here as in a big cruise vessel. Now cruise vessels, they are so big that they have inside such ballrooms, and really it is exciting. And those vessels became more bigger and bigger. And we as a ports, we are faced with some problems. We have to dredge, we have to make our key walls much more stronger and so on. But anyway, it is very nice. You know, I want a little bit to prolong this one discussion and to say that really a lot of changes in shipbuilding, because shipbuilding all the time develop in a cycles. We know that from 2000, China has only 10% of shipbuilding capacities. Now they have somewhere 53 and so on. And if to put together China, South Korea and Japan, it'd be somewhere 93% of all shipbuilding industry. And if you take container vessels, it'd be much more. So, and we have to think why it is so, why this one is concentrated in this region in Asia, why the industry became slower in United States, in Europe, all over the world. But there is probably some reasons. And first one reason is that in those countries, as we see state, government support this industry very much. You can get better legislation, you can get financing, you have support in export and so on and so on. And it is very nice to see now that the program, the strategy India has as well. They want to grow up, and they said that 2030 they will be in top 10 of shipbuilding industry, and 2047 in top 5. So it means new players coming. Vietnam has as well some ambitions to come in this industry as well. Europe, today in Europe we have only 4% of shipbuilding. And then regarding your question about labor, I want to say that one of the problems probably it is that those countries, biggest countries, shipbuilding countries, not only with the state support, but they have a labor, they have a traditions, and they have a skilled labor. So in Europe, there is problem. I can see in our port, in Klaipėda port, we have as well. And we are very lucky that we keep shipbuilding inside the port. The port is diversified. We not only carry cargoes, but maritime industry as well important. But the main problem probably in a port and in our shipyard is labor. So we have to think how to create bigger value, how to do things more expensive, but it is very difficult to compete in this one field.
Dr. Kim, I wonder if you could talk a bit about South Korea's historical management of the cyclical nature of shipbuilding. This is something that August brought up, and the idea is this has to be managed. It's also very dangerous. How can we learn from South Korea's experience in this deeply cyclical economy, which makes industrial planning very challenging?
Right. Thank you very much for having me, first of all. And then, John, you are talking about this market, this industry is very brutal. I perfectly agree with you that it's brutal actually in the very volatile demand of the vessel in shipbuilding industry. Also, dazzling the speed up of the technology actually, and then also it's trying to kicking the ladder. Right. So let me just point out just one point about what kind of the industrial policies Korea did in the first stage of the development. First one is that I think that is a kind of the second two stages competition. The first one is in the first stage, Korean government grant the first shipbuilding contract exclusively to domestic shipyard. That is the first one. And then once the first vessel is successfully delivered after 2 or 3 years, subsequent project should move to open competition. So allowing both domestic and foreign shipyard to bid. This two-stage approach helps Korean shipbuilding industry enhance its competitiveness. So combining early stage the government commitment and the market-based discipline, I think that is very important. And second one is about I'll talk about the high volatile demand later. Second thing is about the MASCA project. You may not be familiar with what is MASCA. MASCA means Make American Shipbuilding Great Again, MASCA, which is coined not by the Trump administration, but produced by the Korean side when you're talking about the trade deal in July, MASCA project. So we all agree that Trump's proposal is so absurd, totally unacceptable. But we try to make use of this kind of things as an opportunity, not a threat. So MASCA project, this is the if you have a look at the what's the reality now in American shipyard, then one of the Korean companies now bought the shipyard in Philadelphia, and find out that it's a totally disastrous situations. No competitiveness in not only in the delivery time, but also the production capacity and the labor, everything. Much to be desired. And so the first stage of the MASCA project cooperation is something like the 80% of all the processes should be done in Korean shipyard, then delivered to American shipyard, then just finalize the process. The reason is that if we just make this ship in America, then we cannot meet up any price competitiveness and also the quality competitiveness. So this is one thing. And another one is that you're talking about the labor. Korean shipbuilding industry is now suffering from the labor shortage. Now at least 15% of the shipbuilding areas in Southeast Asia of Korea now they are foreigner. And then this is deeply related to the highly volatile cycle of the shipbuilding industry as well. And then after the pandemic, then Korean workers just disappeared to go to the construction area, which is more profitable than shipbuilding. So foreigners came, and then now the MASCA project can provide the opportunity that we can make use of the American ship laborers, which Americans said that they have some labor force there. So I think that this kind of a labor force also we can we can make use of this kind of thing. Also, there is a notorious act in America. Burns Act, and Jones Act, which are highly protective, measures to protect the American shipbuilding industry, leading to the disastrous situation now in current situation in America. And then we want to make use of this act as well. We don't want to just repeal this act. Just we will have a highly dense cooperation with the American shipbuilding industry, and then we can get the stable demand from the domestic American areas, industries. So not only the naval cooperation, but also just some commercial fleet. We can make use of this kind of a stable demand from this highly protective measure. Thank you. Mr.
Thank you very much. I'm struck by the fact that for many countries trying to develop a shipbuilding industry, it's usually naval procurement that helps smooth out the cycles. And so it's really interesting whether a country can actually build a competitive shipbuilding industry without actually having significant naval procurement. So thank you, Dr. Choi. I'd like to turn over to Mr. Dasgupta, not just to respond to what he's heard, but given the cyclical nature and the fact that India is really making a huge investment at this particular time, how does the government of India, how does the Indian industrial associations look at the market, look at policy to have a good sense that they won't make the mistakes that others have?
Thank you, Jonathan, and good afternoon. To respond to your first question, how does the market look like to all of us? Extremely congested. And in fact, we are all aware that the whole ship building ecosystem today is concentrated in a very specific geographical location. And it is, in fact, interesting to note that one of the leaders in that, the Korean Republic, is actually saying it's further super concentrated in China. So we not only have a situation where we have a serious concentration, we also have a super concentration. And that becomes extremely important for a nation like India, where almost 95% of our volume of EXIM trade does happen through the shipping routes. And on two important verticals, we are extremely dependent on availability and consistent supply of vessels. One is our requirement of energy, for which the bulk of the crude which gets refined in India comes through the vessels. And another second important vertical is that of the coastal shipping requirements for India. India also does most of its electricity generation through the GenCos, which use the coal that is produced and concentrated in the central eastern part of India. And the bulk of the coal movement also happens through vessels through the coastal shipping route. And going forward, as we all know, we are a very populous nation. So we have a general shift and a focus and shift in modality towards the shipping route for at least the movement of bulk products, wherein again the coastal shipping becomes important. Now, on these two factors, considering that we have less than 2 to 3% of the ownership in terms of the vessels that we produce or own, it becomes extremely imperative to understand the dynamics of the market. And therein, our Honorable Prime Minister, he was aware to this, and right at the start, he put focus on the maritime sector to coincide with this kind of a super peak that we see, as one of the panelists has already spoken in terms of the shipbuilding industry being extremely cyclical. We are somewhere almost, I guess we have crossed the peak, but somewhere there, because the replacement cycle has coincided with a stress on green ships also. So that is the opportunity area that the nation is looking at. And we have had extremely important initiatives in terms of the shipbuilding financial assistance and the shipbuilding ecosystem assistance, the cluster system that we want to build. And as Professor pointed out, the Korean story, where they possibly focused to begin with on two important points. One is the ability to do it themselves, the domestic capacity building, and also the value addition. So on both those terms, we are trying to also have those elements in our policy, where we have said that 30% of the value addition has to be done by the domestic players, and we are also trying to get the whole ecosystem. And very briefly to dwell upon the second point of labor that you pointed out, in that we are, we have that in abundance. And in the recently declared initiatives, there is also a stress on the skilling of that labor. And I believe that if that coincides, we are at a very interesting junction where we can, leverage the congestion that's there in the China, Korea, Japan nexus, and the innovation that can also come from the West, and be a point which can be a pivot for the next shipbuilding ecosystem that can, provide a sustainable and consistent supply of ships to the world.
Alga, so I'm wondering if I could ask you to build on this. The European Union and Lithuania are kind of in an interesting position where you're both a source of funds, a source of revenue, a source of technology, but you're also seeking to build up your own shipbuilding capacity as well. So, one of the big questions we're supposed to be talking about today is, what policies, incentives, and partnerships are available? I wonder if you could take the European and even the Lithuanian view of what are the tools that you think are most useful for breaking into shipbuilding or for reducing the concentration in the industry?
Yes, probably the first one thing is not necessary to compete. And we have to understand that, especially for Lithuania, such country with 2.9 million people, it is impossible to compete very big countries. It is very, very small country. So we decide, and we know that we have to probably not to duplicate, but to add something to the value. When you produce, to make some more different things what it is now in industry. And in Europe as well, we can see that European shipbuilding now concentrates on very special vessels, on cruise vessels, on dredging vessels, on special service vessels, on jackups, on all those things what it is more higher value, to say additional value. It is first one thing. Another one thing probably it is, and what we are doing now, to collaborate, to work together with those countries. And one very nice example is that our shipyard has some communication and collaboration with Indian companies, and some Indian companies, they are even not building vessels for us, but they are doing design, they are doing another things. So we collaborate together and we build new vessels. And one small thing is, of course, legislation. In Europe, it's very strict with all those sustainability things. and we are forced to follow many rules. So we pay attention, and in our shipyard, in European shipyards, how to make new technologies and how to prepare licenses for them. For example, all those engines, hydrogen, ammonia, methanol engines, they are produced in Europe and they are licensed. So we have to make this addition value for this one industry. As a port authority as well, what we are doing now, we are building in this one time in one shipyard in Baltic states, in another country, but hydrogen-driven tanker. It be first one tanker which powered by hydrogen. And we as a port authority, we are doing some small scale factory to produce this one hydrogen. Again, it is a new generation of vessel. So you have to be smart and you have to be flexible.
Dr. Choi, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, from the Korean perspective, you made the strong case that really South Korea views its shipbuilding industry as a strategic asset, fundamental to its national security. And that's one of the reasons why we do have this MAGSA and NASCA, this work with the Trump administration. What are the policies that make other countries attractive to South Korean foreign direct investment? Maybe not on the scale that's imagined for the United States, but you talk about Peru, you talk about the Philippines. What are the policies that would really be conducive to more cooperation amongst the countries represented here?
Okay, I think that's a great question. Because as some of our panel already pointed out, the shipbuilding industry is basically, fundamentally, is very competitive one. So if you are enjoying those a large portion of shipbuilding industry, and you are benefiting from the special status, you have no further incentive to cooperate with other countries. But nowadays, the strategic landscape has changed a lot. So firstly, as I've mentioned before, the strategic calculation I think, is really pushing South Korean government and companies to work further with foreign countries, because fundamentally, shipbuilding industry can be pursued by private sector alone. If you look at the history of Korean industry, South Korean government fundamentally assisted shipbuilding industry by way of financial supporting through Korea Development Bank, Korea Exim Bank, and so on. So a lot of government supports were required. So it is kind of combination between private sector and government assistance. So the strategic calculation is first. And second one, if you break down the value chain of shipbuilding industry, there are really some niche area that requires some specific intervention from other countries, such as design, right? And the AES and MRO, and production can be also kind of decomposition. Production can be scattered around countries with like-minded countries, right? So these kind of new perception to decompose the whole value chain of shipbuilding industry, I think, is really important. And in this context, our partner countries from Southeast Asia, as I've mentioned, Vietnam, Philippines are really one of the most important partners for South Korea. And in this similar context, I think India has really, is a prominent potential partner for South Korea's next step.
Arjun, Hongzhong, I'm wondering if you could give one specific example of an investment or a financial incentive that you would suggest to any country, either in the North or the South, to actually make this kind of ability, this reduction of concentration in the market feasible. Arjun, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, if you look at historically, and Professor Choi again has mentioned about the state support that the Korean shipbuilders got, but shipbuilding globally has always relied on state support. It's an industry that just doesn't work without it. If you look at, I mentioned India is doing $10 billion over the next 10 years in shipbuilding. China does $11 billion a year. And they've been doing it since 2004, every year till today. And they're going to continue doing it every year for the next 10 years. So it's it's an industry that really requires state support. Unless the state is behind the industry, it's not going to grow. As you've mentioned, because we're working on very, very fine margins, very low margins, and yet it's very specialized. It's also one of the very few industries in the world that is capital intensive on both the builder side as well as the buyer side. Shipbuilders require a lot of capital to have shipyards to build the ships because we are often financing it for the clients in the beginning. And shipping companies who buy the ships need a lot of capital to own those ships over the course of the next 25, 30 years. It's unlike, say, this convention hall. You need a lot of capital to buy the convention, to make the convention hall. But people who use it or who come to, see a show in the theater downstairs, they don't go and take a loan to see the show. So it's a very strange industry in that sense. It's a little bit like the airlines. But unlike airlines, which is concentrated amongst two main manufacturers, here it's spread out amongst many competing manufacturers as well. So state support is extremely important. This industry doesn't work without state support. And if you see China, Japan, Korea, even today, the reason they're competitive is because of the state support to reduce the input cost of building the ships. If you look at India and look at China, the differential on a handy-sized vessel, $33 million, is around 24%.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
We want to line up questions. We'll take 3 questions. So I just want to get people ready to go for that. We'll give Dr. Kim the last word. $11 billion a year investment subsidies from China. How do you compete with that?
Well, I don't think that we can compete. In the ordinary, for instance, the containers. Ordinary market, ordinary containers, ordinary size container market. So we are now navigating towards the blue ocean of the high valued, so such as the drilling rig or LNG LNG carrier, or the very, very high, very huge, very large containers, these areas as well. So don't want to compete with China in the Red Ocean. So continuous, the technology advancement against China would guarantee there's some kind of the blue ocean. So that is our strategy. Okay, yeah, and then we think that we have some achievement. Yeah.
When it comes to shipbuilding, right, we often focus on the can, the hull, rather than the beer. But the beer is where the value is, right? This is where the money is made. And so I want to talk a little bit about beer rather than cans with this excellent audience. And we use this as a vehicle. If there are no other questions, for kind of giving your closing remarks as well. So, Germany makes most of the propulsion that goes into a lot of ships. The United States makes the combat systems that go inside a lot of Aegis class warships. The biggest debate over beer now is what is the green technology that will drive shipping for the next 30, 50 years, right? And this is a fundamentally important decision. Whoever has the advantage in making that particular technology that becomes the industry standard, right, is going to have tremendous influence in the market. And the question is, if y'all can't agree on what it is in advance, China is going to pick it, right? It's going to pick the one that's most advantageous to China. So talk a bit about how your various, and we'll go down the line, how the people you represent, the industry you represent, the organization you represent, how do you look at this green transition and think strategically about how to pick the right technology that allows the world to compete with China?
So we make extremely specialized ships for the European market primarily. So I'll talk about from my organization's perspective. Currently, we've delivered already a set of hybrid ships. So these have conventional diesel-powered main engines with battery packs to support during when it's calling into ports. We see that that's led to 50% lower carbon emissions. But more and more when we're going forward, the areas that we are working on is methanol and also hydrogen. But if you ask me which one is probably more sustainable and which ones the Europeans at least are looking at, I would say today it's methanol.
I want to make sure Mr. Desgupta gets the last word as our putative host. So Just real quick down the line, please. Dr. Choi.
Okay. So, firstly, I want to emphasize two things. Firstly, the South Korea, as I've already mentioned, the advanced tech ships, I think is really important. And in this context, not only cooperation with developing countries, but also cooperation with other European countries has opportunity and really need further we have to pursue down the road. And second thing, so why we should cooperate? Because if not, the ships and the maritime route will be governed by some other forces, and that we would not want. So in this context, the ship industry have to collaborate, cooperate, and we have to set up the platform for multilateral cooperation. And so these two things should be should be emphasized. And we have to remember that when we have firstly really strive for our shipbuilding industry, the United States helped us a lot, and now it is less developed countries in terms of US in terms of shipbuilding. But I think the spirit of collaboration should be revived. Okay, I will stop here.
Yeah, I only want to say that probably the future of shipbuilding it is greening, and we are doing inside the ports with our service vessels, as I said, hydrogen-driven and pilot vessels, electrical, and other stuff inside. But as well, we are creating corridors, shipping lines. They like now to have corridors, ports where they can get renewable fuels. Well, in a port, we have, of course, LNG. The vessel is built in Korea, and we are very satisfied with it, and it works very nice now. But anyway, it is a little bit fossil fuel LNG. But anyway, it is again, we deliver this LNG fuel for another vessels which come to us. And really it works. We attract shipping lines to the port. And I think that now greening of shipbuilding, recycling ships as well, to make recycling this circular economy, as well, it is very important. So I see future in that.
We can cooperate the technology, innovation. When it comes to the shipping, decarbonizing the shipping route is very important. So just focusing on some several projects. I think that Korea also we are very hungry to cooperate in cooperating these areas with the other countries, including India and America as well. And then we have some, we can say that we can quite commercialize the producing green ship by 2030. So I think we have some level of technology, and I really want to cooperate with the other countries. Thank you.
Mr. Desgupta, you're the only thing between us and lunch.
Yeah, and I have the final word. So in terms of the focus on green, in terms of what I can say, because my company is the nation, India, and my shareholders are the citizens, and we are answerable to that. So we have the National Green Hydrogen Mission, which was floated by the government. So there are 3 ports designated as the green hydrogen hubs for India. And my port has already commissioned the first 1 megawatt scale green hydrogen plant. Apart from that, we are also looking at becoming hubs for e-fuels, green fuels, bunkering. And then we are also looking at the 2 vision documents that we have, the Maritime India Vision Document and the Maritime Amrit Kal Vision Document, which kind of takes us to 2030 and 2047, wherein there are Harit Nauka, the green vessel initiatives, under which we have already started a transition program for the tugs in the ports. And we will also be targeting transitioning to green inland waterways vessels to up to 1,000 vessels till 2030. Then we have shore-to-ship ideas, which we are trying to have in all the ports. So we have the National Solar Alliance, which kind of is one of the sources for the renewable energy that we talk about. And most importantly, as Arjun was pointing out, the whole of the nation approach. In that, what we have done is in the recently declared financial and procedural assistance that we have declared of up to 69,000 crores, we have said that if you build green vessels, the subvention and the financial support is the highest. So you get 25% assistance in terms of financial assistance, and you get another 3% interest incentive. And if you see the whole thing together, it pushes greening of India's ports, it pushes greening of India's shipping sector. Finally, we are also trying to build a circular ecosystem by incentivizing the ship breaking and giving 40% of that as a credit note to anybody who has, the scrap value of that ship breaking for the shipbuilding that he's going to eventually take. So I think that, we are competing, but competing in a positive sense, and we look forward to be the shipbuilding center for the world to come in the coming times. Thank you.